Yeah, I'll just say hello to these wonderful ladies who come from Blackpool and Bath, respectively. And Anne is the project search coordinator, European, for the world, I'd say, all over the place. Got the enthusiasm to die for. Amazing. And Carmel, I've known for a little while now because we're involved in another set of projects related to resilience called Head Start, which is a lottery funded piece of work at Carmel. It's very enthusiastic to be a search project site in Blackpool. She's the Deputy Chief Executive of Blackpool City Council, and she can make things happen in the council. And it's a very exciting role you have too. And I was really thrilled this morning when I woke up. I thought I'm going to wear my new dress. Wonderful Carmel and I made that. Over to you two. If anyone uses any jargon that people don't understand, if you could just try and explain things rather than use shortened terms. A couple of people have mentioned the resilience framework, and we think, what's that? That's a piece of work that we've done many years ago. We developed a resilience framework that lots of people in the room know and use. And if you don't know what it is and you're vaguely interested, have a look on our Point website. If you think about an hour or so for you two, with people ask questions as they go along, you said was fine. Very informal. There's no such thing as a stupid question in this room. Everything is allowable and permissible as long as it's polite. Over to you two.
Thank you very much. I was going to say a little bit about my job. I'm Deputy Chief Executive at Blackpool Council, and it's a great job. And driving some fantastic policies. I've written some many HR policies and communications policies. And you know, just before I came here, I was at a breach panel. I was talking about some data breach issues. And we do some great work with our team, really good work on freedom of information, request and data protection. And we do some really fantastic. I've written policies to them. Fantastic policies, procedures, stuff. I've got some meetings all the time. Always doing exciting things. And then there's Project Search. Project Search has got 7 young people in Blackpool into paid work. Here, it's got another 11 young people who are all of them to get into paid work this coming year. We've got a project opening up in Blackpool, which is in Blackpool Hospital, which is going to take another 12 young people and get them into work. And you know what? Can you guess which bit of my life I find the most exciting?
Data breach.
Absolutely. You know, this kind of stuff. I am so privileged as Deputy Chief Executive of the Council to be able to do some of this stuff. It is an absolute privilege and an honour. And you know, if you've got that opportunity, and I'm looking around with loads of people, loads of opportunities, and loads of inspiration, and loads of ideas, you just have to do what you can to make a difference for people. And boy oh boy, there's a difference to be made for people with learning disabilities and their ability to get paid jobs. I'm talking about volunteering I'm talking about paid work. So I guess to start with, I just wondered if we might think about resilience and work. Does anybody, what does work do for you? Resilience and work. Lots of jobs in this room. What does it do for our personal resilience? Does it fall apart?
Is your routine?
See? Yeah.
Sense of belonging.
Belonging, yes. Value. Value, yes.
It's like identity, often.
Identity, yeah. Yeah, independence, both financially and emotional independence. Social life, support networks. You know, it's absolutely crucial. And school is brilliant, isn't it? Until age 16 or 18 or 21 or whatever time you leave education, it's absolutely fantastic that you've got all that, you've got that community and you've got all those people around you to give you all that. But then from 21 onwards, you need something else, something really, really important to you. And it's largely about a job. So for me, if you want to have some sense of control in your life, if you want to have make commitments and be committed, have people committed to you, if you want challenge in your life, if you want to develop, you want to grow, you want to build self-confidence, have some self-worth, how much does a job matter? Absolutely critical. And yet, we have a great swathe of people with learning disabilities who are largely excluded. And when I say largely, I mean largely to the tune of about 94% excluded from paid work. So I guess what we're about in Project Search Terms is trying to level that playing field and make it a little bit easier for that transition to happen between school and work.
Well, my background is, I actually just moved to Bradford on Avon from back in Wiltshire, so it's difficult living with that, but as you can tell, I'm not originally I'm from Washington, D.C., and I have a background in special education and supported employment, and I consider myself a lifelong job coach, and I have really enjoyed a lot of experiences of people getting great positions and the ones that suited them. So I got to kind of grow up at the time when things about instructing people systematically were being invented, and also planning for people personally was being invented. So I was very, very lucky. I was kind of in those roles. And then I came to the UK 25 years ago. My mom was from Bristol. So my parents retired over here. And I wanted to carry on developing opportunities for people. My eldest brother has something with autism, so I think he's kind of on my shoulder going, come on, Anne, life could be better. And I guess I bring a bit of American rah-rah, apologies, and also a real, like, everybody has to have a job. Because if we don't have a job, we are really badly off in the States. We don't have any really nice social net to support us. So there's a lot of terrible things about that, but it does make us all really want jobs. So that kind of helps, I guess, in some instances. So unfortunately, so I've been working here freelance for those 25 years, helping start support employment and do, the jargon, person-centered planning, and really thinking about how communities can develop more opportunities. And I have lots of lovely individual stories I can tell you. Wonderful volunteering opportunities that develop, wonderful individual jobs, but not really much impact. And then I came across Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and they were really working on something that I'll talk about a little bit more later, but they were having really good results. And lots and lots of people were getting full-time paid jobs from that. And in the meantime, our rate here, this year, it's gone down 6% paid employment for people, adults with learning disabilities. And it has been as high as 8%. It's gone down to 6%. I think it's about 15% for people on the autism spectrum. And those figures include 1 hour a week paid jobs. So not life-changing jobs that, you still have to have services and other things in your life other than your job. If you have a little tiny job, you're still going to be dependent on a lot of other support needs, aren't you? Whereas what we're seeing is in the full-time paid jobs, then more of your life is in the contribution side rather than in the receiving services side. So that's kind of interesting. There's also, at the same time, there's been research with people with learning disabilities, and 40% have said they'd like to have a job. That's even without people really knowing a huge amount about work sometimes, because I noticed that we moved here when my son was 1, and, since he was about 2, I've been saying, what are you going to be when you grow up? Oh, you're interested in trains, will you be a plumber? But my brother, nobody ever asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, and most of the people who I work with, the young people coming into their last year of education, they haven't really thought much about employment. If they have, they're thinking maybe they'll be a cleaner or maybe they'll be with food. In the United States, that is also very similar. People think, what's the most similar to what we do at home? So it kind of makes it easier to think, well, people will be able to do that because they will practice at home as well. So, but people don't come in sort of knowing about all the different work opportunities there are out there and being able to kind of match that, their interests and preferences and dreams and ideas to that personally. And also, I don't know if you have, but I've had a lot of experience where somebody comes in saying, I want to be a pilot. And what we usually say to them is, well, I don't think you have the academic background to be a pilot, but you know what? You could push trolleys at Tesco's. And so it has nothing to do with, and instead of going and exploring airports and figuring out what does that mean? What does being a pilot mean that this person is talking about it? Is it the uniform? Is it the coming and going? Is it being around planes? Is it about being around people with suitcases? You know, what is it that we don't get funded or have the time to go and be creative like that around what do you mean if you say you want to be a pilot? But there's a lot of people who still say, with all that all those barriers, there's still a 40% of people who learn still they say they want to work. So that's very interesting. And then if people do say they want to work, then again the funding rears its ugly head, and we don't have a lot of resource to do finding out about the person and finding out about the employer and figuring out how we can introduce the person to the employer. So we often just go with whatever we think the person can already do. Whereas I don't know about any of you, but I certainly couldn't do all that I do now on my first day. And yet the people with learning disabilities will usually say, you have to get ready, and you have to be perfect at this, this, and this, before you can really even put you on the list to get a job. And then you have to do it in this many weeks, and you have to pass this many tests, and you have to, we have to think that you are employable. So it's like, nobody said that to me. I just, sort of really followed where I thought I might be interested, and I had a lot of people encouraging me. But there is a lot out there. There's full-time, there's part-time, there's volunteering. So those are, and more, I would say in the time I've been here, there are employers who are saying, yes, I'd like to take my starting corporate social responsibility, or I really would like to be an inclusive employer. I would like to have people with disabilities working for me, but how do I do it? I mean, I've actually had bad experiences. I've had people dropped off from a minivan, and the person who dropped them off saying, well, I'll see you in 8 hours. I had a big hotel in London say that to me. They had to lock down the hotel because people just scurpered and they didn't know where they were, so they didn't know what to do. So we've had people who have been talked into having somebody and then not having the training and support that really you would expect that anybody would need. But certainly somebody who had a learning disability would need the right kind of training and support for them and for that particular role. And those job coaches in the world, it's hard, isn't it? Because we have these huge lists of people we're supporting, and then we have very little tiny bits of time expended each one of them.
So I suppose one of the things that I wanted to talk a bit about was about how you like the field, because it certainly isn't. You're talking about that level of exclusion on the job market. You're talking about 94% unemployment rate in that group. Nobody can ever say that, it's like a level playing field, actually, put their ideas on. There is a need for us to find leaders within employer organisations who are up for this kind of stuff. And they really are out there. I was at our Health and Wellbeing Run, as I know the other day, and one of the people actually from the Hospital Trust said that he thought the best thing ever came to Health and Wellbeing Run was a presentation about Project Surge. And I think that's kind of indicative of what you can do with this project if you really take it up. Because it almost sells itself in terms of outcomes and what it delivers. And you really can get people excited about it. And you really can get them to engage with it. And you do need to do that because it won't always be easy to get to the right player. You need an employer, you need education, support, and you need some support of employment. And they all need to be totally engaged in making this happen, and you will need leadership. Now, I haven't found it difficult to find leaders who will support it. I really haven't found it difficult to find them. And I think they are out there, but I'm just I think that the best way to get them involved in it is to take them by the hand and take them to it. Because we don't understand it really until they see it. So, for example, our leader, every year will come and meet the project search students at the beginning, at the middle, at the end. You know, I make him do these things. It keeps going on, I'm posting lots online managing. But I will manage it to make sure you see. So, you know, you do need to get your chief execs and your leaders of the council and people who are important in businesses, and you need to get them to kind of look and see and do this stuff, because you've got to make a case for them around why this stuff is important. One of the things about equality is that first, equality can be used against you in this area, and has been used against you. Because people will say, especially in councils and NHS, it is a big organisation like that, probably university, but you know, they'll say things like, well, our recruitment policy says that, you know, everybody's got to apply in this way, it's all online, and you know, people say, well, we can't do that because what you're asking us to do is different, and we don't do different, everything's got to be the same. And there's a lovely saying now, there's nothing more than equal treatment of unequals. And this is absolutely true about this area. So, what JFDI just doesn't do it, or you can use it the way you want to. But what I always say to people, like my background is HR, what I always say to people is, what I'm doing is making a reasonable adjustment to the employment processes in our organisation to let some opportunities for these young people work through. And I don't care. You can take it to court if you want to take it to court. You do whatever you like if you want to take it to court over that. But that's what I'm doing. I'm making a reasonable adjustment to our employment processes. And you know, I've been making reasonable adjustments to employment processes for years. A platform and stopped before it. And I have never, ever, ever had a case brought against either employer for all those years, and all the things, all the rules that I wrote. Nobody has ever challenged me. Now, did people take us to tribunal because the recruitment processes didn't work very well? Because they thought they were discriminating against us? Yes, they did. The processes that we use are generally so rule-bound and rigid that people can tribunal and take us to tribunal through those. But the stuff I do, which is off-piste and nothing to do with any of that stuff, nobody has ever challenged me. So if you get that resistance, I'm more than happy to speak to people, HR people. I mean, I'm one myself, so I can say real works, you know, about rules and you can't do that, and like this is the commas of the HR world. And so, you know, you need that, certainly you get it from me. And the other thing about it is when you do some stuff, and when you get these things going, you have to make a lot of noise about it. You have to do publicity and get press involved and good pictures and all sorts of stuff to get the thing, you know, get it into the ether, the place where you are. Because we're talking about such a long journey, such a long way to go to get anywhere near the employment that you need. So you've got to grow it, you've got to be brave, you've got to be out there and just do it.
You know, I really agree with you, Carmel. I think one of the best sayings I heard was from Susan Scott Parker at the Business Disability Forum, and she said, to treat people fairly, you absolutely must not treat them fairly. So equal opportunities has been a horrible, you know, you must have 5 GCSEs and a driving license before we even look at your application and things like that. It really hasn't been right. So I found Project Search really helpful because it was employer-led. So Cincinnati Children's Hospital, the head nurse in casualty, Erin Riley, 19 years ago, she looked around and she said, you know, over half of the children who come to this hospital have learning disabilities, and we don't have one role model. And that's not right. That's not right for them, that's not right for their families. Plus, I have a lot of hard-to-fill posts and high-turnover posts that are in my support roles that I think people could learn to do from what I know about the way people learn. So the story is that she looked in the yellow pages, which was still being used back then, and rang up Susie Rutkowski at a local college and said, can you help me? And then So she came in and she used what she knew about the way people with learning disabilities learn best in context and best if they practice a bit more, but can certainly learn to do complex skills. And she brought that to the partnership. And they started their first one at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. That is now, so they've had graduates for 18 years, and they have 60 employees from programs over those years. And the very cool thing I think that Susie brought to Erin was a very, she probably got more ambition for the young people from Erin, actually. Because I find out the employers I'm working with, it's often the employer that says, oh, of course, this is possible. I mean, Eastbourne District General's been amazing, haven't they? And they just, oh, it fits right in with what we think about our values and what's the interaction, listening into action, and it's actually sort of compatible with so many of their policies, and they've been really quite visionary about you, I think. And then Susie's brought the rigorousness that actually people aren't going to succeed unless they have the right training and support, and we haven't been putting that in anywhere really, around jobs. We put it in around other things, but we haven't really been putting it in with ambitious jobs in mind, full-time paid careers. So, and then it's been researched up and down the road. I will certainly give links to all of those. We've had some of our own in the UK, but it's evidence-based, and we in the UK now. And please do say your successes, but our average last year amongst 31 programs was a 65% success. And the national average, as I said, remember earlier, gone down 6% last year. So in the recession, we've gone up to 65, so go figure that. I think it's the elegant construction. I think it's a welcoming employer. I think it's excellent education. I think it's good support employment, but it is really the elegant design of pulling that all together in a person's last year of education, anywhere from 16 to 25, because that's fundable. It's very practical too. It's like, we can bring in the funding, we can do this, and we can sustain it. It's very important that it's 1 year for the young person and no more. It's a springboard into a job. You don't want to just kind of keep doing it and have that become your job. But it's an ongoing program for the business and the partners, because we get better, don't we? We kind of look and we're heads joined, and we get better and better over the years, because we learn what works best in this community, what works best for this employer, what works best for the young people. We get better at recruiting the people who are going to get the most out of the year. And interestingly, it's not the highest achieving young people. I think it's the people who are most keen on a job, and also people who are going to really benefit from an hour's curriculum in the morning, and then 4 or 5 hours of practicing real skills, and then a debriefing in the afternoon, and people who will get more and more independent, resilient, self-managing, problem-solving, and really learn about being a great employee over the year. That's the young person that we're looking for. So we're not looking at the people who score the most when we interview them. We're looking at the people sort of in the middle who and mostly about interest. So we have typically 8 to 12 students. In some very rural areas, we might have 6, but that's costly, because we have to have a full-time instructor, and we have to have full-time dependable job searching too. So because that team is amazing, and you take the young people from being children in education, and they grow up in front of your eyes, don't they? It's so exciting. And you also, I think, hold the tension between education, which should be about contribution and effort, and kind of nurturing and supporting, and being a bit more softer side than an employer who's thinking about independence and contribution and outcomes. Because especially we are actually now in we've got a lot of jobs in the private sector for people, and we have some private sector project search programs, and we have to fit their bottom line as well. It has to be something that's worth their investing in, because they're going to have to feel that they get really good talent pool out of it, and also really good sort of influence on their teams as well. So we have to have these wonderful people on site who kind of hold that tension for each young person of growing up and becoming, a potential full-time employee. So we want it to be your last year of education, whether you're 16 or 24. So some people are really ready at 16, they want to get out of school, they want to go straight into a job. We're probably more around 18 to 22 is our norm, because of people who tried college, gotten a lot out of that, and now are saying, now I want to be an adult in work. But it's also, we use the springboard of education because you're used to have more of a routine, more something regular, and you haven't maybe lost some stamina or some skills. You've had a break. So that's interesting. It's a preventative approach, I think. So you're in this, the host employer gives you this base, and for the teaching, and it's kind of your place, and then for Project Search, and then the young people go into, each one goes into a separate internship in different departments, depending on their interests and the skills they want to learn that term. So they do that daily for 10 weeks, and then they change to a different department. So over the year, they have experience of interviewing for a role, leaving a role, adding skills, and then thinking about now what? Let me build my CV and see where I want to go next. But always, everybody is wildly focused on the job at the end, aren't they? Even though it's really busy during the year, it's like we're always talking about jobs. So I don't know if you guys want to say anything about East Board District General, which is a lovely program, but nice to meet you both.
Yeah, I'm only 2 months in, so I'm still learning very quickly. But I totally agree, it's a fantastic program, so rewarding. And yeah, in these 2 months that students are making those, we watch them grow and develop incredibly quickly. And, actually, at the moment, 72% of last year's
Woohoo!
so we're hoping that that's going to carry on going up. And so the benefits are just that, you don't have to talk anybody into this project. As soon as you open your mouth and start speaking about it, you're drawn into it. That's how I got into it first. That's amazing. And let's go ahead.
You guys have worked hard to make it really be part of the hospital. It really belongs to the hospital, I felt last time I visited.
Yeah, that was true. Very supportive. And we've worked incredibly hard. They largely students out. The amount of we've got people working in law, we've got administration, decontamination, so it's really a wide range. They always have a lecture.
Well, a lot of people say to me, oh, just bring us the employers and you can do this. But actually it is about, again, you've got to be really there and prepared. All these guys have to go in and learn every single skill set before they teach it. You can't just show up on the same day as somebody who's going to learn to maintain an endoscope that costs £35,000. You have to know how to do it. And we were just getting into Jabil printed circuit board and small manufacturing up in West Lothian, and they're saying, well, the job coach will have to teach alongside a technician because they're not technically trained enough to do the job, but we're going to teach it to the Project Search students together. So it's really interesting. It kind of very much challenges you about the value of what we're teaching and who's the expert here. So this was the first group that I got involved with at the Royal United Hospital that now has 25 graduate employees, full-time paid employment at the Royal United Hospital. And through Access to Work, where you have a full-time on-site job coach. Because as people need to add something to their role, or maybe they have a bit of a difficulty with the bus, or the manager leaves, or the office has to move, or something like that, we can put in very specific, personal, one-to-one requests and get get that kind of funding. So what I love, the Dutch seems so fit for purpose to me. It's very exciting. It's not too much. It's not somebody going, oh, hopefully I'm on site forever and I'm going to keep you from ever being independent. But it's there before the big problems happen. You know, people with learning disabilities have difficulty with change. But usually in support employment, don't we have to go in after. It's all gone horribly wrong because we're not funded to be connected enough up front. But here, you know, Jackie's relationships with all the departments mean somebody will say, you know, this manager's leaving and the new one's coming. Can you come in and make sure that's okay for me? So that's really interesting. Anyway, 39 programs last year had graduates. 30 in England, 8 in Scotland, and 1 in Ireland. That's why I get to call myself European. But we do have one going into Rotterdam, we hope, in September. 24 in hospitals. And you can understand why, because it started in the hospital, and it makes sense. And hospitals are uniquely, suited because they are like the working world. Did you know there are 350 careers in the NHS? So you go in, there's manufacturing. People are assembling surgical kits for surgeries. There's every kind of logistics, distribution, there's every kind of job in there. And one young man I know went in interested in admin and came up being a technician in the gastro department, so because he started loving to work with the equipment rather than the people. So we're in 24 hospitals, 7 councils, of which Blackpool was one, 5 private sector, really getting into the hotel industry now. So we started at Heathrow Hilton Terminal 5. They talked about it to their group, so now we're in Sofitel, and next year we'll be in the Marriott. Have to worry about, is everybody in London going to go into a hotel program? There's other things too, but anyway, that's great. The businesses have led it there, definitely. We're also have programs inside the University of Strathclyde and the University of Aberdeen. That's interesting. And here, I was telling about how we've been trying to improve. So we went from from 2010 to 2013, when we had 17 sites. We got 176 jobs, and then in the 2014 graduates, when we had 23 sites, we went up to 65%. If you add those together, that's 300 full-time paid jobs since we started in 2010. So, and then 8 new programs are starting next year. 4 or 5 businesses already identified. One is that manufacturing firm I talked about. One is Great Ormond Street. One is Collindale Infectious Disease Research Center, Public Health England, and really wonderful employers knocking on the door and saying, please, can you help us with project research? So this is the Blackpool Eligibility Guidelines, is it not?
Yeah, I think for us, one of the key things is about design to work. And we have to work really hard on that. We are in our second year, first year. A couple of students maybe weren't in the right place around that design to work. That's something we've really learned, and we need to test out a lot more in the interview and selection process now. Is there a strong desire to get into the job? And to some extent, we've had some issues with families around some of that as well, which we need to work on. The family being concerned about the person's ability to remain in work and what that might do to their benefits, etc. So there's a good bit of work to do around making sure that all of that's right to the person. 16 to 23, but again, like Anne said, most of ours have been in the age range of 18 to 23, lots of age group. We have to make sure we've got the right skills for our business, and that there's a good match between that. But actually, again, because like a hospital, we've got such a range of activities that people can do, we more or less can kind of suit, can find something for anyone in most cases in the council.
Imagine the Blackpool Tower if you like strictly. And also that wonderful bus.
Ability to take direction and learning to support the environment is important. And again, that's those sort of skills that our health coaches work on and our tutor works on. Public transport's always been an issue. It's amazing, isn't it, how we're spending a lot of money busing people around, and then when we get older we need to do travel training because we haven't got the skills for us to move around. And that can be a bit of an issue because some of our placements are out of it, so that's something to kind of think about. Nobody has to meet the higher level of academic qualifications to be involved in this programme. Now, sometimes when you read that, you might be thought it sounds tricky, but again, it comes back to me as business managers doing it, because we can work around, if we have had problems with that transport, we can work around that. Some people have found it a bit more difficult to take direction, but we've worked around that and we've made it work. This is probably the thing, this desire to work is probably the key thing. Once everybody's on that same page about getting that person into employment, and that remains the focus of what you're doing, most everything else you've been able to work around and make it happen.
I really agree with you, and I think you can see that every program decides on their own approach to that, don't they? So you choose the guidelines for you. And that was just our signposting in Blackpool to say, we think these are the young people who are going to get the most out of this. And it's all, again, very practical. So the reason the public transport's in there is that you're going to have to get to your paid job at the end. So if we don't deal with that now, it's going to be something that might trip you up later. It's all that. And if you don't take direction now, you might lose your job. Even if you get a job, you might lose that job. Do you see what I mean? So it's all about what is it that employers are looking for, and how can we look for people who want to learn that?
So our experience that is, these are our new council offices. They're really bright and shiny and beautiful and wonderful. And in there is a classroom that's for the students, and it's right next to HR, and it's right in the centre of everything we do. And they're there in the workplace all the time, so it's really exciting that we were able to do that. 10 students in year 1, we've got 11 students in our year 2, 70% success rate in year 1, and bitterly frustrated because I want 100% success. I'm pretty sure this year we'll do better because we've learned a lot about from year 1 and what our role is learning. And we got them to agree to do it like Victoria. And the thing about the hospital was the chief exec was so excited because there are a range of complex jobs in the hospital that I find it quite hard to recruit to. And when they do recruit people to them, they tend to leave quite a lot. There's quite high turnover in some of the jobs. And he knows that some of our young people will be absolutely going into that type of work. So he's really excited about what a difference it will make to the hospital to be able to find work for some of the young people there. So that it wasn't a hard sell at all to the hospital. So just a few little stories really, just to kind of tell you a little bit about some of the students. So that's Gregor. He works in HR, he works in comms, he works in public services, he does a lot of admin work. He's now a job in the Head Start. And he's just an amazing young man. He's been to a few things with me to talk about his experience of work, and he will come and do public speaking with me absolutely at the drop of a hat. He's a very happy young man and very pleased with himself. This is Bradley. He's worked across the organisation. He's really interested in ICT, and he now just has a job in ICT, and he benefits because, as Anne told you, we were able to secure some money for additional support during placement, and Bradley gets help, which really helps Bradley stay in his job and develop. Jake's probably my favourite. I shouldn't have a soft spot now. I have an absolute soft spot for Jake. That's absolutely brilliant. Jake. From get-go, one of the things about Jake was he can go for the buses in the town and Blackpool, the things for our town to go and the bus. And if you said to Jake, I need to get from here to License, Jake would tell me what bus to get, what time it was, and what number it was, what time it would be there, and all that sort of. He absolutely loved the bus.
The bus company knew him as an ambassador, didn't he? Because if he saw someone struggling at a stop, he would advise them.
Yeah, it was an absolutely fantastic guy. And we put Jake, we own the bus company in Blackpool, so we said to him, would you like to take Jake? on one of the internship cycles, please. Now, well, actually, I got the leader to ask. Then, of course, we did come here. They put Jake into the customer service centre. The MD of the bus company went into the customer service centre to have a look around. And when she went in there, she noticed there was a staff behind the counter in glass. And then there was Jake out front talking to people. And she's telling them about buses and when the trams and what's happening and all sorts of things. And she was watching Jake, and she decided going there to take the bullets away. Because, you know, Jake was showing the way really about, you know, Jake just communicates with people at a human level, and he just wants to help you and support you and help you get from A to B. And he just showed what needed to happen, you know, in a way that, you know, ways just wouldn't have dared. It's Jake's difference, the way he approaches life that made such a difference to the way she thought about that whole interaction with the customer. Now Jake works in the tram division because it's just amazing. You know, how could they not employ him? He's the best ambassador they will ever have.
Well, I love he didn't make a fuss about the glass, he just ignored it and came out.
He did, yeah. He just didn't like it, so he just kept coming out the front. And this is Ben. Ben currently works in my team, he's in the comms team. He's a fantastic young man, works in different areas right across the team. I actually think Ben could work anywhere. He's really adaptable, very positive. We recently had some people in from Canada who were talking to us about something called frameworks. I'm from Washington actually. It was about frameworks and communications, and I invited Jake to come along to this, and I was thinking, Ben liked it. I thought, oh, Ben liked it, and he loved it. You know, got such a lot from it. And again, that's something I think that we've learned as us. We've had to think, well, we've got a job now, so that's that. But actually, now we have to keep developing, growing. And he's just a tremendous young man. Had to persuade his mum and dad that he was going to be okay. And it's so weird because Ben was probably he was probably the most capable student in that cohort. And I had no doubt, none, that he would hold down the job full time. And his mum would be genuinely worried that he wouldn't be able to do it. But what persuading to help to see how Ben was in the workplace, which was obviously different from her experience, how he was at home. But an absolutely fantastic young man, amazing, smartest guy ever, comes in a suit every day, fantastic guy. So I guess, why should you be interested in this? Well, I think we've probably said one of the most disadvantaged groups of people in the job market. Think about the public sector duty. You know, we've all got a duty in the public sector to represent the people that we serve and the communities that we're in. How can we stand by where a whole group of society are disregarded in terms of their employment? Well, we just said at the beginning what being employed means to us, the difference it means to our lives. How can we say that this whole group of people don't matter when we've got a duty to try and support people who are going to the job market? It absolutely builds resilience in adults. I can't think of anything that is more resilient to building than having a job as an adult. I really can't think of anything that gives you that social network, that support, financial independence, all those things that we really need. For health and for councils, this saves you money in the long run. Because I tell you now, if Jake wasn't working on the buses, Jake would be wanting some sort of a service from the council. Jake would be depressed, and he would be lonely, and he would be isolated because he's got such an amazing, fantastic personality. But if you locked him up in a bedroom and gave him nothing to do, I don't know what would happen to him. I'm trying to think what would happen to him. He needs the space that work gives him, the contact that work gives him. So I don't get councils who don't want to sort this out. I just don't get it. And I don't get hospitals who won't do it because these people will be coming back through your door with depression and anxiety and all sorts of illnesses because they haven't got that sense of resilience and work. There's a massive untapped talent pool, isn't there? People who can do fantastic job. I saw somebody she worked for one of these retailers that sells cheap stuff, like pound structure, or one of them anyway. She was talking about their labour turnover rates and how they just, staff, the attrition rates were horrendous. But when they employed people with learning disabilities, they stayed and they were loyal and they benefited the organisation and they were a great group of employees. Like turnover, attendance, loyalty, morale. When I was in Stockholm, we employed a young man with Asperger's. And I went into the kitchen one day and there was a lady in there. And she was laughing. And I said to her, why are you laughing? I said, look, my family is just, it's always something about common interest rates or something like that. I went out and I thought to myself, I have never seen that woman laughing. I haven't. She was the most miserable employee I think we had. Nothing was ever right for her. But Mohammed was a teacher in a way that others couldn't. And another time when Mohammed was, when I came away of being something like this, and I came back and I said, Mohammed, you don't go to meetings, you need to meetings. You need to go there. A lot of troubles for this, and his boss says, he was so funny, he was sitting next to me, just like nudging us, saying, when's she going to finish? When's she going to shut up? When's she going to end? Probably like nothing now. But what she said afterwards, I rethought the way I do my meetings, because he was probably articulating what the rest of them were thinking. So you take from people, we were talking before about, we're doing some work with HR people about induction programs around learning disabilities, saying to them, what should we do with our induction materials to make them more accessible to what I do? Let's make them straightforward. Let's talk plain English. Let's make it clear. Wait a minute, wouldn't that help everybody? Thinking about learning disabilities and thinking about the way you communicate, make it better for everyone, does it improve on that? And can you ever value diversity in your workforces when you just exclude people about it? So, kind of to Anne really to wrap up.
Well, I just wanted to say that I think it's really interesting to think of it in terms of resilience because I think that Project Search students every day impress us, don't they? I mean, they're hosting employers with their resilience. So I'm just thinking, and it's wonderful because they're young and exuberant, and one young man I know quite well, when I asked him what he brought to his department, said, well, I do a good job, but I also think I really enjoy my department. And so who doesn't need that? But because there is that youthfulness and the desire to be there and whatnot, it's the big employers are willing to learn alongside and to adjust and shape. And they don't all have to be, forgive me, but a colonel, who gets it right away. And I mean, one example I have is, it was a sad example, but there was one young man who fell in love with a new colleague in his department. And he didn't really know how to say that he was liked her and would like to be friends. So he just figured out where she was going to be at all times, and then he would be there. And so she reported him for stalking. And he went into this huge draconian, elaborate procedure that the hospital had in place for stalking. And it was awful. And his job coaches helped him through. But what the Human Resource Department learned was actually maybe we need something a little bit less fierce for misunderstandings between colleagues, where people could kind of figure that out at a lower level and everything would be fine and you didn't have to, brought in the police and all guns blazing, And I just thought, wow, what a great lesson that he's taught that hospital, but maybe they probably wouldn't have learned it talking about it every week. You know what I mean? It really needed the human and the youthful mistake. Because, Aaron says there isn't any mistake that in 19 years, that any of the young people made, they haven't been made by a doctor or a nurse or somebody else, and worse. So it's not like, but we're scared, aren't we? We're scared that people are going to make mistakes and then they'll be discarded and thrown aside and fail, and that would be awful. And I just think, so it's really interesting. It is kind of an exercise in resilience. One of the things I'd love to suggest, if you guys will let me, is people also have other lives besides their wonderful jobs. So maybe you've identified areas where resilience teaching and support would be useful for some of your Project Search students and graduates. And maybe there's some relationships here that I would hugely suggest you go visit East Bourne District General and meet some of those fabulous young people. But maybe there's some ways, because sometimes Project Search reveals other gaps and weaknesses. Well, mostly it does, doesn't it, in communities of, well, we're good at this, but we're not very good at, maybe providing, might be because when people leave youth services and go to adult services, it's different, and some people have to kind of fall off the cliff before we pick them up again, don't they? I'm looking at you because I know what your job is, but I'm just, it's difficult. Do people have enough of a social life? We have had people who've been really good at surgical kit assembly and landed a fine job that everybody wanted, but it was from 2 till 10. And 2 years later, our job coach realized that she wasn't very happy, and she was pretty lonely, and she started self-harming. And it had to be, and her job coach had to realize that's all she has in her life is this 2 till 10 shift. And then she goes home to everybody being asleep and nothing in her life. So we had then the partnership, the Project Search partnership of the school and college and the support employment service and the youth commissioning and the adult commissioning and the hospital all kind of got around her and said, what can we do? Is there things we can signpost her to that will help her, have a social life, have friends? Of course, they put her up for an earlier shift. So that was pretty easy. But she's still going to have all those things missing in her life that aren't really Project Search things. You know what I mean? And so how could, and those things build resilience too, don't they? If you have friends, you're safer. If people miss you when you're not there, you're safer and you more belong than if you don't. So I guess as well as if you're interested in Project Search, I can talk for England on it, as you can see. So please, I have my card with me. Please get in touch. But also, I'm thinking, what a cool group! Aren't there some other things that we can borrow from each other? Or I don't know what you guys are thinking, but what a great group of people to meet. And I'm sure there would be some big benefits from collaborating with some of the people here. Is that okay?
Yeah.